Yeah, hi, I'm Arlo Howard. I'm a interactive theater and game maker. I suppose you could say a playable theater maker. Um, and uh, and it's so funny that you mentioned that we haven't talked about what I'm talking about. But I want to talk about onboarding. Let's see if I can get my slides to go. There we go. Let's talk about onboarding. So I think in playable theater experiences, onboarding is super important to think about. And so I wanted to talk about it today. So, oops, hold on. Sorry. These have gone a little haywire on me. All right. There we go. There we go. Choo-choo. Let's talk about onboarding. Fabulous. So one of the things that I was taught, I come from like theater land, so I got a degree in directing and then ran a theater company for 7 years and made weirder and weirder things until I ended up in sort of like immersive theater and then got interested in playable experiences. And one of the things that I was introduced to in my directing training is this idea of like this window of opportunity in a play, for example. The first, 5-10 minutes of a play where we introduce the creative vocabulary that we're working with. Like, is this a puppet show? Is this a musical? Is it Beckett? If it's Beckett, the window is very small for people to come through. It's a little difficult to access, but musicals, it's a big wide open window. You can hop through at any point. So the idea is like, how do we like open the window for people, help them jump through the window into our world versus sitting on the outside and watching the whole experience through the window from the other side of the glass. And I think in playable experiences, this idea of getting people through the window to be a part of our experience versus standing on the outside and observing it is especially important because we want them to be able to play. And in thinking about that idea of that window and onboarding, the first step of that for me is the idea of the threshold, that space between what your everyday life is and what the world of this experience is. And I've seen it done a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's just like a door that you open or a curtain that you go through. There's some experiences that create like, oh, a dark maze with spooky drones that you like are going through this dark maze, and that's your sort of transitional space. And there are, I think, a lot of interactive or immersive experiences that are using a bar space as a traditional space. So you come from your everyday life, you come into this bar space that has a light theme in it, and then you transition into the world of the main experience. So there's this idea of transitioning from your everyday life into this sort of fictional space, this space of play, however you want to think of that. And this, what I've got here is demonstrating my most recent project, The Order of the Golden Scribe, that sort of threshold transitional moment for The Order of the Golden Scribe. We had these posters lining the stairway down into the space, and we've got these posters saying, "Blessed be the golden narrative," or "From many pens, one vision, one story." And we've got this, for me, it was about giving a little teaser, a little taste of the group, this organization that you're about to encounter. And so in creating this sort of visual threshold moment, I wanted to have a really clear symbol that is like a vibe. It gives a vibe, right? Of this sort of this eye that's got like big Illuminati vibes to it. Like, this is definitely a secret society that's probably up to no good. So yeah, I'm my own chief vibes officer. So it's about, creating like what is that sort of experience. So I've given a little teaser here of what the world that you're about to go into is. And I'm using these sorts of ideas around design of, can you, with a 5-second glance, give a snapshot and context of the world in which we are playing together. So that brings me into the next bit of onboarding. So you've got, your threshold, your transitional moment, and then we've got the visuals of the space that you're in. Now, this could be an elaborate built out set with millions of dollars put into it, or it could be something really simple. It can be about the way you arrange the space. So this is sort of what you encounter when you come into the Order of the Golden Scribe. You see tables arranged with chairs around them, delicate teacups, linen napkins, tiny spoons. So it gives you a really clear sense of what we're playing with relationship-wise. You're going to be sitting in seats. This isn't an experience where you're going to wander around a bunch. You're sitting in seats, and you also are assigned a table. So it says okay, these are where you're going to be sitting. If you're a pair of people and you see all the tables are set up for 4 to 6, you understand that, we're going to be playing with other people. So we get a lot of information about what the experience is going to be like just by seeing what the space is. We see this giant eye symbol everywhere, so we get this idea of this dominance of this group and this feeling of being seen and watched all the time, which comes in later with the type of gameplay that we're going to get into. I also find, in terms of creating experience using the visuals of costume design, I think costume design is an amazing tool for storytelling. And so we learn a lot about the people of the world before they even open their mouths. We know a little bit about them. They're all in these matching weird pajama costumes with medallions and ropes, and so we get a sense of what's happening in this world before anyone even says anything. So we've got an idea of what's happening visually. So that tells us a little bit about how we're going to play before we even begin anything. And sound, Lisa already started talking about the importance of sound design. Sound design is so key. So in Order of the Golden Scribe, you enter and there's this lovely light jazz playing that has all sorts of cultural context. And we won't dig into too deeply right here, right now, because we're just talking about onboarding. But if you entered that space, and even if it had the same visual design, but there's creepy, ominous music playing, it sets a very different tone for what the experience is going to be and how we're going to play together. Whereas if I had some bops playing, the way you're going to enter that space and the expectations of what the play of the experience is going to be like is quite different. So I think I cannot understate the importance of sound design. Gorgeous. And then we get to people. So we've got a threshold moment, we've got some visual design, we've got some sound design, and then we can get to the actual people. With the people, I think the first person who speaks to your players or your audience, however you like to use the term, I use players and audience pretty interchangeably based on my background, but I think the first person that speaks to your players is so important and so key in terms of setting expectation for what the play will be like. So if it's, so these are just 3 different examples of experiences. So in the Burnt City, you enter into the space, you're given some instructions out of character, out of worlds, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But you enter the space and you see nobody. You're not greeted by anybody, or maybe you see someone distant in shadow dancing and stuff. So it sets a very clear expectation of how you get to play in this space. We're not going to be guiding you. We're not going to be telling you what to do. You have to find your own way through this experience. Whereas the middle photo is from an experience that I created called A Very Important and Potentially Life-Altering Mission. You are instantly greeted by this person who's having a little bit of a frantic time, but they are really glad you're here, and we're going to all go through this together, and they are there to onboard you from the second you arrive. They are there greeting you, excited that you're there, really grateful that you've shown up because they really need your support in this. And you get this sense instantly that you're going to be going through this adventure together. You're going to be really integral to what happens, that you're going to be able to talk to this person and this person's going to talk to you, that they're relying on you. So you get a very different sense of what the play of that experience is going to be versus an experience where there are performers who are not talking to you. Just two different ways of seeing it. And this third photo is from a show I created called Farewell, My Friend, which was a sandbox style show, 13 rooms, 14 followable characters, and it was half text-based and half dance-based. So that moment of threshold, that first person who greets you would look at you, take you in, draw a card from this like custom-made tarot-esque deck, and would fate you to be welcomed into the family of Montague or the family of Capulet. So we get this sort of duality of like, you will exist in the world in some places, there will be text, but there will also be this more poetic rhythm to the experience. So it sort of lives halfway in between the first two examples. So we are setting very different tones in these different experiences. And in order of the Golden Scribe, the way you are greeted first into this experience is someone comes through the curtain and they say, "From many pens," and they're waiting for you to respond with one vision, one story. Often nobody knows what to do. Sometimes people have gotten the in and know what to say, but then this is a picture of the character Dennis, and Dennis is a very lovely and fun character, and is like, helps you out knowing what to say. You get a second go at it, and you get to try again. So you get this idea instantly that, there are expectations that you know what's happening, even if you don't know, but that there are characters here who are going to help you. And also there is a lightness and a comedy that is introduced quite early on. After you've gone down this hallway of these like spooky eyes, it's like, yes, there's this nefarious organization, but we're going to have some light, fun play with it. So that moment of threat of that first character greeting you is really key in terms of setting the tone of how we get to play together. Which brings me to casting our audience and guessing who they are. I think you should leave your audience guessing as little as possible who they are in the world. You want to tell them as quickly as humanly possible who they are in the world and how they get to play. So you want to figure out, how do you get them to understand who they are in the play and how that affects how they get to contribute to the play of the world. So in Order of the Golden Scribe, as soon as you sit down, you've got this little note tucked, quote unquote, secretively. It's pretty easy to find. And that note explains to you, hey, you're not who they're expecting. Just pretend like you know what's happening, and I'll get you all the information that you need as soon as possible. So that tells you right away, hey, it's perfect that you don't know what's happening. That's exactly where you should be. Just fake it till you make it. And we've definitely snuck in here. So I already have this casting of like, you are yourself, but we've snuck you into the secret organization. So you're going to play along, and we'll put together a plan as quick as we can. I think there's definitely ways to ask audience to play characters. I think in creating this, you just have to be cognizant of how far away the role you're asking them to play is from who they are in their day-to-day lives. And how do you support getting them there? One of the things that I found in my work that I quite like doing is saying, like, you can be yourself, but you're just in this extraordinary situation. You're yourself, but you now work on a spaceship. You're yourself, but you're now infiltrating a secret organization. And you can always offer, because I know some people find it helpful to have that sense of like alibi in play, and you can always offer the space for them to like make up a name by just asking them, hey, what's your name? They can give you their real name, or they can make up a name if they're feeling like they want to play a role. Sidebar on getting players to play characters in a playable theater experience specifically. I think there's a lot that we can learn from tabletop role-playing games and live action role-playing games. And there are really great tools that are being used that can, I think, in ways be adapted. So in like a tabletop role-playing game like D&D, there's a player's handbook, there's character creation sheets that help you understand how to build a character. In this is like in a LARP that I played, I was handed a 4-page document that explained the world that we were playing in, who my character is, and what their role in this world is. So it was a document that laid out all that information for me and gave me space to create within that. Because I think that in order for a player to play a character in the world, what they really need to know are a few core essential things, like what is the world we're playing in? Like, it's hard to ask someone to create a character or play a character when they don't understand the rules and the dynamics at play in that world. They should have some understanding of their choices in creating a character. Like, are we all playing humans, or like, can I play a worm? Because that sounds fun. And then understanding the impact of the choices they make. If I decide to play a worm, how does that change how I get to play the game together? And then I've got Ulra, my friendly little goblin here, representing the idea that you can also use live facilitators to sort of bridge that gap. If you're like, I don't want to have to do a bunch of paperwork, but I do want people to play characters in my experience, you can have a live facilitator help bridge that gap and bring people into the task of creating the character to play. I think that leads us lovelyly on to the idea of learning the rules of play in a game. So I've got this square of Mario here, and I'm sure folks from the gameplay end of things might know the story, but I found it really inspiring, is that in Mario, World 1, Level 1, Screen 1, you learn everything you need to know to play Mario. You learn about running backwards and forwards. You can learn about jumping. You learn that there are little enemies. Sometimes they look like angry mushrooms. And if you don't jump out of their way, they will run into you and you will fall and you die. If you punch question marks, you get coins, and some of them will give you crazy rainbow mushrooms that will give you powers, new powers. So it teaches you everything you need to know in order to play and win the game. And in that same way, going back to the idea of that like little window of opportunity at the beginning, like when we set the framework of the type of experience we're playing together, in those first 5 to 10 minutes of the experience, you want to set up that framework of here's how we get to play together. So we want to think about how do we learn what the rules are of this world. And rules don't necessarily need to be like, all right, let's sit down and learn the rules. They can be within the play of the game itself. So I've heard this referred to as diegetic versus non-diegetic, which is basically fancy words to say in-world and out-of-world. There are some things that I think work really well in each one, but I think it's just about being cognizant of where you decide to do it. So I can put things like, hey, we've snuck in and we're going to be sneaking around and I'm going to give you secret missions. That learning those rules of gameplay can sit really nicely diegetically in world. I can tell you that in world. I don't necessarily need to tell you that out of world before you come in. The things that I like to place out of world before you come in non-diegetically are more the instructions of usually safety things, frankly. So in Order of the Golden Scribe, the thing that I'm putting out of world are the ideas around like food safety. So I'm saying like, okay, we're gonna check your dietary requirements before you go into this world, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, is this a character thing? Is this something that if I say, I love to eat cheese, that I'll unlock a one-on-one full of cheese? Like, no, it's not going to happen. So I'm putting these sorts of important safety things or logistical requirements out of world, non-diegetically, and having more of the invitations for play inside the world diegetically. And I think it's a really important distinction to make between what is an invitation and what is instruction. What is something that you have to do in order to play? Like, I do need you to sit down at a table and not run around the whole space the whole time, because it will get too chaotic and it won't be safe because the space is too small for everybody to be, running laps. And there's the invitation of, but you can sneak away at a very particular time. So it's just about thinking what in your experience fits in these particular buckets, which I think leads me neatly along to the idea of agency. This is how I feel time I talk about agency. It's like, oh yeah, well, they'll do this, and then if that happens, then this happens, and then if we give them this agency, then they can do this. I feel a little chaotic, and I also feel like this is what it feels like when people try to argue about what is and what is not agency, experiences that do and do not have agency. I know there are people who have tried to define multiple different kinds of agency, like, oh, you can have physical agency to move through the space, you can have narrative agency, and I think that's great. We could do a whole talk on agency, but we're not talking about agency right now. We're talking about onboarding. I think it's important to think about agency in your onboarding, because that is, when you think about the types of rules that you're introducing to players, what you're really introducing them to is what their agency in the experience is. And I'm defining agency simply as the ability to make meaningful choices within the work. And that can be whatever suits the purpose of your particular piece. I think of there being like three main ingredients to agency. I think the players need to understand that they are making a choice. Like, it doesn't really count as a choice if you don't know you're making a choice. And they also need to know what the options are and the repercussions of them. Like, if I'm offered a red pill and a blue pill and I don't know what either of those pills mean, then it is not really agency to sort of like pick at random. A roll of the dice does not, in my opinion, make agency, because I don't know what I'm choosing or what will come out of those choices. And I also think to make that agency clear for players and for them to feel that sense of agency is the reaction or the response that comes from that choice. So someone makes a choice and then something happens because they have made that choice. And then these other two notes here are just more like tips as designers. As a designer, you want to design things that encourage that encourage and reward the type of behavior you want to see from your players. So if I want my players to be able to say, it's like, okay, your mission is you're going to talk to these hosts and you're going to try to get information out of them. So what I then tell the performers is like, if someone tries to come talk to you and they ask you about, where your favorite location is to travel with the order, we want to encourage that behavior. So we want you as the character inside this world to get really excited about talking about these things and be like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Here are all of my thoughts and opinions. So we're encouraging the types of behaviors we want to see, which makes it much easier to redirect any sort of player behavior that doesn't necessarily fit into what we've designed, or if like, it's like, not that you can't do that, it's just a dead end. We make that less fun to play with and make it really fun to play the types of agency that we've designed for. And a little note of keeping in mind, you don't have to give people all of the agency in the world. Like in Order of the Golden Scribe, I'm not giving people the agency to choose whatever table they want, because that makes it impossible to deliver everyone the correct food for this afternoon tea that we've designed. And so it makes no sense to be like, oh yeah, you can sit wherever you want. It would just result in chaos. So you can be specific with the types of agency that you offer up to your team. And when offering agency, I think part of that, and as we, onboard people and teach people the rules of our world, there always needs to be a way to opt out or to always opt in play. Like in the world, I need to be able to have options to say, I don't want to do that, that make me, if I'm a player, that I don't feel like I'm going to ruin the experience because I don't feel comfortable with doing something. So if I'm not up for chatting with actors, like I as the designer want to offer players other options to say like, hey, if you don't want to do that, it's not going to break the show. No worries. So in Order of the Golden Scribe, if you aren't feeling up for doing some espionage, if that's not really what you're in the mood for, that's totally fine. You can always say, hey, you know what, I want to stay at the table and do these puzzles, or I'm really enjoying drinking my tea. You can go play that bit and I'm going to sit here and watch. And that it's a perfectly lovely way to experience the show. And I think it's really important to give these types of options of ways for people to always be able to say yes to things that they're excited about, and then make other choices if they're not excited about that. Because the last thing I want people to do, in one of my experience, is feel like they have to do something even though they're really uncomfortable with it. But I do think there are ways to guide people into doing acts that are a little braver than they usually are. And this is where we get into the idea of, once we sort of introduce the rules, we can scaffold our invitations. And what I mean when I say scaffolding is stepping up things bit by bit. You might start with an invite for an interaction that is really simple, low barriers of, okay, I need you to go and find out, your host's name, the one who brought you your teapot. See if you can find out their name. Okay, great. You found out that. Now, can you find out a little bit about something about them, their interests? Okay, can you find out, now that you've gotten to know them, can you see if you can find out from them any locations where this organization might be operating? So we're trying to extract information, but we've started with something really simple and we're working our way up and up and up. And this can apply to any sort of experience that you want to create. Like if you want to create an experience where, you end holding hands with like intimate eye contact, just long eye contact, you might start with like a really, simple ask of just like, making brief eye contact with someone, saying hello. You start really simple with any sort of interaction, and then let those invitations build up, but everything always being an invitation and an option. And though we began with talking about onboarding, I think it's really important to also think about how we end an experience. I believe that we need to spend as much attention and love in how we wrap up an experience as to the way we build it and bring people into the experience. So I've heard people use this term, this idea of closing the magic circle. And I quite like that idea of like, we've created this, magical world, whether it's actual magic or if it's just like a light fiction. We've created this world, and then we have a moment where we close that circle and we say, fantastic, the fiction is over and you're now you again in the real world, and we are the game facilitators again, and we've finished this play that we've created together, this moment of play. And in thinking about crafting that, I'm always thinking about what is that takeaway that I want people to leave with? What is the gift that I hope people exit this experience with? And how do I craft everything to kind of lead to that moment? And in that moment of thinking about like, okay, how do we wrap this up? What are the things that I want people to walk away with? I also think about any duty of care I have as a creator. So if I've dived into some really difficult subject matter, like if I've done a piece that addresses loss or grief, then I want to make sure that I am holding that responsibility of making sure that everyone is doing okay. That could be additional resources, that could be, how I'm ending the piece. It is just about thinking carefully about, what you've brought your players through and how you make sure that they're okay going out into the rest of their day. And now this is the part where I say, do all of this in the reverse order. I always start with what I'd like to offer folks at the end, and then I work backwards from there. So if I want to get to a moment where we can, talk about grief at the very end of our show, I was like, I'd really love to give people that option of a space to be like, yeah, sometimes you're in grief and that's hard. If that's where I want to get in a piece, then I want to think really carefully about how do I scaffold and support that moment. And so for Order of the Golden Scribe, very different tone, I wanted to get people to the end where they're like, yeah, we've done a thing, and like we can take down this system. If we all work together, we can take down this sort of like domineering system, and this like hell yeah moment. And that's what I wanted people to get to. And so I thought about how do I scaffold this experience and build up to that kind of moment in terms of how do I get people and our players to a place where they feel that they can lead a moment of the show. And it's, again, that Mario thing of that, the fact that this first level of Mario was designed after the rest of the game was built. And in that same way, I would figure out where I was going, and then I'd build my onboarding really carefully to get us to that point so that people know how to play, they know the world we're engaging with, so we can get to these really exciting moments of play within the confines of our experience. And you may have noticed that nowhere in here have I talked about pre-show emails. I know a lot of people get really excited about pre-show emails or like online web experience, like pre-experience stuff. From my perspective, I think for playable theater in specific, that any pre-event comms should be non-essential. Yes, because people ignore them. I am guilty of this myself. You send me something in advance, I am never gonna read it because I got other shit to do and I don't necessarily have time. It's not that I'm not interested, it's that I forget, or if I decide to come last minute, or if someone's out sick and they've brought me in as a fill-in, it's really difficult to feel like, oh, I haven't done any of like the homework in advance, so I won't feel ready to come into this experience. So the way I like to approach it is I like to use pre-show comms and any like pre-event things as a way to help people decide if this event is for them. So any information that can give you a sense of the tone, the vibes, as we said before, so that people can kind of get a sense of like, is this for me? Would I, enjoy engaging in this experience? I also like to give people things that can help them feel prepared for what's coming. Like, do I need to wear tennis shoes, or am I fine to like actually like get fancied up because I'm not going to have to be running around, a room full of sand? And I also love to use it as a way to get people curious and excited and be like, ooh, what's this? And it feels like a little teaser that's interesting and has like made me lean in and sparked my curiosity. The other thing that I do like to also do just a tiny bit is give deep divers a little bit of something that will help them engage in the depth of the world. Because I think people who are really invested in this kind of work and they love the pre-show stuff, amazing. I give them a little nugget of something. So in Order of the Golden Scribe, if you read the pre-show email, you'll see a little note that's like, hey, if they ever say to you from many pens, you've got to respond with one vision, one story. So you get this moment at the very beginning of the experience where you know something, but it's totally inconsequential. Like, it doesn't matter. And if you haven't read the pre-show email, within 30 seconds arrival, you know the thing that everybody has read the pre-show emails know. But it does give people who like that sort of pre-show engagement, gives you a little bit of something, but not something that will be significant enough to change the way the whole experience plays. And that's everything. That's everything I've got about onboarding. So I'd love to just move into a Q&A. I think about onboarding all the time. I haven't really kept up with the chat. But yeah, I would love to, hear what questions, curiosities, if anybody else has other opinions about onboarding, I'm here for it. Yeah, Melody.
Awesome. Thank you. Amazing talk. Again, just blown away with the amount of thought that's gone into all this stuff. Um, so I'm a avid GM. I love GMing for TTRPGs. And one of the challenges I face is trying to find a way to integrate uh the player's creative component of when they get
Mm-hmm.
to like create who they are in this world uh into the experience more.
Mm,
I love session zeros. I love having like the sort of, explaining here's what the sessions or here's what the campaign's going to be like, here's what the rules are and whatnot. But I also like to try as much as possible to integrate stuff into the actual story. um so my question to you is, how do you go about integrating the player's creative aspects into experience, if there are any, and what challenges are there related to that?
yeah, I think it just really depends on like the types of experiences you're making. The experiences I tend to make tend to be for general public, and so it's like varying levels of creative practice levels. Some people who have like probably haven't done a lot of creative play, since they were kids, and sometimes it's people who go to all sorts of things and LARP all the time. So get a really big variety. And so generally the way I like to design is sort of I I actually think about like, people that I know who are not creative practitioners but have like a little creative soul in them, and like how do I build something for them where they can come into a creative space. And it's that idea of like scaffolding in, like giving them enough guidance and then having a space that I open up for them to be able to play openly and creatively. And for folks who are more experienced creatively, I feel like they're more comfortable diving in and I just like yes, yay what they bring to the room. Does that address your question? I'll admit I got excited and then there was like three things. Did I answer it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. But yeah, in terms of like character building, because you did ask specifically about that kind of stuff, like I've not done any experiences at this point as a maker where my audience are making characters within my experience. I generally go with, hey, you're yourself, but with a new hat. Yeah. Alistair.
Hi, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. And like there was like yeah, I was making a lot of notes. There was tons of inspiring stuff in there that got me thinking, oh, I should be, oh, I should think about that. Oh, think about that. One that really really jumped out to me is was when you talked about closing the circle and closing the experience.
Yeah.
And it made me realize I think I kind of struggle to do that with my own creations. Like I think I find it quite hard to find what is a kind of, satisfying way to, to close things off, so I'm not sort of sending the audience back out into the world with a bump. Um, do you have kind of any sort of tips for that, or anything that sort of works for you in terms of coming up with an ending?
Um, the annoying answer is it's really going to just depend on what your experience is. For Order of the Golden Scribe, we did the very simple, like, music curtain call, everyone takes a bow. We know the fiction is done, and we've closed that loop. I think it can sort of depend, like if you've done something that is a little more emotionally resonant, and you can have like an aftercare sort of space. I've also done sort of like after resources where I've been like, hey, if this brought up big feelings of any sort, here is a link to a thing. And it would be like resources, or also for folks who've got like big feelings, like I want to do something to change the world, also giving folks like next steps. So it really does just depend on what the experience is. And I think for me, it's about thinking about like, what do I want people to leave with? Where have I gotten them to? And how do I close that off and wrap that up?
That's actually really, really helpful. I mean, what you say about next steps, I think that's exactly what I needed to hear. So I don't want to waste anyone's, but that was brilliant. That's really helpful.
Great. I'm glad that's helpful. Amazing. Mark.
Oh my goodness, wonderful presentation. Okay, so Arlo, this is more of a blah than a question.
Okay.
I don't know how to frame it as a question, to be honest. I've got this project and it lives somewhere between playable theater and I guess improvisational theater.
Okay.
And the number one piece of feedback people have given us so far is we don't know when we're allowed to play and when we're not. And and part of the problem is that the people who are the actors think that they're doing an improvised performance. And so they want to fill the gaps with funny bits. And so the people who are playing are like, well, I don't want to interrupt any of the funny bits because these seem like these are the funny bits. And so it creates this weird tension where we're inviting them to play, but then they feel like, oh, I don't want to interrupt the show.
Yes, I think, and this is something that I've run into in other conversations. I think the skill sets of an improviser and a a game facilitator, while there is overlap, they are two different skill sets. And I think having a really clear understanding of what that role is takes time and practice, and also just guidance from a creator. So in Scribe, like there were bits between characters, but where we have character relationships, it is never the main focus of the experience. And so I think about sort of when I'm structuring an experience, I have really specific like, and at this point, the audience do something. What they do is what they've decided at this point here, and they'll do it here, and we're going to let them do, and our job here is to support whatever it is that they've decided to do at this point previously. So I think it is important to like really like give hard structures for like, and this is when the audience do a thing, the players do a thing, and we support what they've decided to do. And I think just shifting that framing for performers to be like, you're not a performer, you're a game facilitator, and your job is to support the play of the people who've booked a ticket.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Arlo. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Elizabeth.
It's me.
Hi.
Hi. What are some techniques you have used for flagging opt-outs while staying in world? Or just like an example from your work, I guess.
Yeah, I usually just build them into the gameplay, so it's not necessarily like, hey, this is how to opt out. It is literally just like, here's another option. So like the simplest example I can give is I created a game that used like little mini games inside of it. And so we did a sort of like telephone whisper game where you'd have a message and you whisper into the next person's ear, and then it passes down the long line and we see how it ends up. And it was all about legacy and how stories are passed along and how they get twisted through time. But I gave, because I was like, that can be really intimate for someone that you don't know to whisper into your ear, or it can be like really sensorily not nice for people. And so I gave the option of, instead of it just being like you pass it down the line, it was like, you turn to the person next to you, you say, you'll never believe what I just heard. And then they can either say, ooh, tell me, I love gossip. Or you could say, no, I don't like gossip. And in that way, you've just in game had a way for you to be skipped over. So you've just created game mechanics that allow more options. Does that make sense? So I think it can be designed in any way, but that's how I like to design things, is just like within play, here are ways. But I also usually start everything with, you can come and go as you please. Here are where the bathrooms are. Like if you have a chill space, point out where the chill space is. Like sort of like opening up the space in the beginning so that people always know. Like I've seen projects that do a really great job of being like, hey, this is a really intense interactive experience, and one that I'm working on will do this is like, and if you ever need to chill, like, you know, the red couch is really cozy. It's a good place to chill out if you don't really want to talk to anybody anymore. So I think just laying out the landscape and having a spot that is chill if it's a more open world. Yeah? Groovy. Risa. Friend.
Hi. That was amazing. It was beautiful, by the way, and so
You're
fun.
amazing.
So my onboarding question is, so I love everything that you were telling us to do. And I'm like, yes, we should do all of those things. But the thing is, for me, at least, my problem is I'm like, yes. So if I try to do all of those things, it feels like onboarding gets very long in the experience. And then it's like, when do you get to the play then, right? The playing. And the thing is, when I think about when I experienced Scribe, I did not feel like I was onboarded. I feel like I just got in and already was experiencing the thing. Like I didn't, and so it's like, how do you do that? And what are your secrets?
Yeah, because I don't necessarily think of like, it goes back to that idea of like diegetic rule learning. So you learn by playing in the same way as like that Mario example, like you learn by playing, but we make the first round, the first screen really simple. So I think the way I usually think about it is, again, like designing backwards is like, okay, I want to get to a point where the audience can take over the experience, that we can hand them the reins, they make a decision, and we do whatever they've decided. I know that that's where I want to get to. So then I think about how we step up to that, and then just sort of build it into story and build it into the world. So instead of having to be like, and then this is how you do this, and then this is how you do this. And one of the things that I think I've found and kind of learned by trial and error, and again, playtesting, is sometimes you just have to simplify things pretty significantly. Like there were like the initial draft of Order of the Golden Scribe had like many different layers that ended up getting scrapped just to simplify, to be able to get to people to that point of gameplay that we wanted to get to. So yeah, I think it really just about saying like, okay, what kind of mechanics and tools do people need, and how can we integrate that into the story? Like, oh, like pointing out the exits, I just put it in the welcome speech where we've already got characters on stage. It happens diegetically, like, here are where the exits are. We don't touch people. That's not the golden way. That's not the way we operate in this world. And I think if in the experience of things, we started having issues with like people like making contact, then I would have put that non-diegetically outside of it. Side note. But yeah, I see how much I can build into it, if that makes sense. Yeah, cool. Got Evan. Hi.
Arlo, you just at least answered 3/4 of what I was going to ask. It was really about it was about showing and not telling. You know, they always preach, you know, the side of things, and it sounds like you've often, you know, valued putting things diegetically into the space, but I think you were flagging that some people just don't get it unless it's like really explicit. I guess I to follow up, it would be about, have you built in redundancies, like where you try and do it whimsically and then flat out say, you know, here's the bathroom?
Yes. So I think this is such a good question, and like, yeah, absolutely. So there is this rule of like 3. Like, if something is really important, you have to say it 3 times. And if it's really, really important, people still aren't getting it, you have them repeat it back to you. And it's like, because we're doing what? We're not going around the circle this time. Like, if you find that people just aren't really getting it in playtesting, like, the rule of 3 is really good, and the rule of make them say it back to you if it's super important and people just, it isn't going in. And because sometimes people get really excited and they're not fully listening. So it's about like making sure that their like excitement isn't turning their ears off completely, that if it is really important that they hear that. And I think working with that super dynamically can be really important. And I think a great example of that is like in the final month of the Burnt City, people started to get really elbowy. And so that opening speech where people are led into the space and given a mask and told, you know, you don't talk, you don't touch people, they had to really hit the point of, and if you are caught pushing people, you will be removed from the space. And so I think keeping up with that, because the behavior of an audience or behaviors of players do evolve over time. So I think it's important to keep abreast of that and know what's happening in the space and be able to dynamically change things where needed. Yeah. Max.
Hello.
Hi, Max.
It's lovely to see you. Awesome presentation. It was great. Kind of building on the last couple of comments. Introducing pre-show contextualization information diegetically versus not. I tend to lean towards presenting everything diegetically, and collaborated with folks who have had very strong feelings and opinions, and a lot of them valid, around certain safety things, etc., being presented absolutely non-diegetically and outside of the game world. Have you found or formed any opinions about what kinds of things work better diegetically versus not?
Yeah, of course I have opinions about it. I think both. I think it goes back to that rule of 3. I also think in different ways. I've also worked with like things in an email, things said out loud, and things in a poster, like written out if it's something that's really important. I think it's lovely to have diegetic content, but I think somewhere, if there is absolutely important information, safety information, like date and location information, it's good to have that non-diegetically somewhere if you want people to show up and be safe with one another. If you're like, I don't care if people show up and I don't care if people aren't safe with one another, then have it all be diegetic. But I think anything that is super essential for the functionality and the safety of your experience should be available in some way non-diegetically, so that people know that this is an actual thing and not something that they can push against within the fiction of the world. That is my perspective on it. I'm also a big advocate of like content information being really clear and really like listed out. Like I'm not one of those people who's like, oh no, but spoilers. Because it's like, you know what spoils the experience for people coming to a show that's not for them, or people coming to a show and running into content that they weren't like mentally prepared to run into. So I'm a big advocate for having somewhere, and even if it's like, oh, you've got a whimsical fictional website, but then you have like content information, and then you can click on that and you can get everything non-diegetically. It's a nice way for people to be able to have that clarity. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Right, I haven't kept up with the chat, but I'll try to go back and answer anything that came up in there, because I think that is my time.